What's going on, YouTube? Back with another episode for you guys. Got my pup here with me. We're hanging out. We had a great time in Chicago. We were just in Chicago for Thanksgiving. We spent the week there. Got to see Kayla's family. Got to go to a Hawks game. Got to do a bunch of fun stuff. It was awesome. So we're back home now. We got home yesterday. I hit a buddy up and said, do you want to go fishing? So we went fishing this morning. Got up pretty early. We headed out to Pyramid Lake. We fish there fairly often. It's about a 40-minute drive. And they have some awesome fish out there. I think it is actually known for the world record of the largest trout. So we usually hit it up. We like to go fish early in the morning for a couple hours, then come home. Well, today we go out there, and if you guys can tell, it's been snowing outside. There is snow. There's snow outside, so the colder weather brings the fish closer to shore at Pyramid. So once it gets colder out, the better the fishing gets, especially because I fish off of a ladder. You bring a ladder to just get a little bit farther out. You stand up on it so you're not just standing in the water. Makes it a little bit easier to fly fish and get your flies out into the deeper water. So my fly rod, I literally got into fishing this year, and I was at Walmart and I was going camping, and I had a reel rod, like a reeling rod, and I thought it'd be fun to get a fly rod. So I got this cheap Fairplay Cortland 5/6 weight fly rod from Walmart. It was literally $50 for the rod, the reel, and the line, and everything included. So I figured it was not a very good one, but I didn't know anything about fishing, and I figured that I might as well just try it out and have some fun with it and see. I ended up catching, well, I caught one fish, it broke off, I caught another, and I actually reeled it in. And I had no idea what I was doing. This was a couple months ago when it was nicer, warmer weather, and I was able to pull in a fish on the fly rod. We got about 7 or 8 on the reel rod, but only 2 I hooked on the fly rod. And I had it set up not really right, but hey, it worked. So anyway, back to the story. We get out fishing today. I take my fly rod and we spend about 2 hours without a bite. But we were out there we wanted to be out there for a couple hours. We wanted to get some fish, and you know, the colder weather, we figured it would happen. So all of a sudden, after 2 hours or so, I'm stripping it in. I have a sinking line, so I have a sinking line, so everything's kind of sinking down to the bottom, and I can strip it in from there. So I'm stripping it in, and I feel something, set the hook, figure I got a fish on, super pumped. Start stripping it in and realize that this thing is really heavy. This fish is pulling. And you can really tell the difference between a big fish and a small fish, especially on a fly rod, because the big fish pull pretty hard, as I learned that today. And the smaller fish, they're still pretty fun, but they're fairly easy to kind of strip the line. You strip it, you hold it with this finger, and you kind of strip the line in. And if they need some line to get out a little bit, you kind of let it out. But usually with the smaller fish, you don't really have to do too much of that. So anyway, I hook into this one and I realize, I'm like, this guy is pulling hard. It is a big fish. I'm feeling like, unless I foul hooked him, all of a sudden I'm stripping it in and I see him jump out of the water. Holy! What? You're good. And I freaked out. I saw that he was big. And so I was like, oh man. And I know on the GoPro it doesn't look that big because he was pretty far out there. Like I got out there, my fly went to the bottom, and he had been swimming out for a little bit, and I had to let line out because this rod, I know this rod's not super good, and I didn't want it to break. I didn't want my line to break, so I let him swim out a little bit. I tightened up my drag a little, and I decided to try and just reel him in. Usually I can strip him in pretty easy, but I decided to try and use the reel just because he was so far out. I really just didn't want to risk it. So I start bringing him in, get closer, get closer, get closer. And it's taken me a while. Like my forearm is dead. I'm exhausted, like trying to pull this guy in. So I know he's good, right? So I get him really close. My buddy runs over next to me and he's got his net, and I start bringing him over, and he's only like a couple feet. My buddy sees him. He's like, oh dude, he's a hog. He's a big one, right? So I'm like, yes. And he fishes all the time. So if he says it's a big one, it is a big one. So I get him right there, couple feet away, so close. All of a sudden, no! This happens. My fly rod snapped in half. Didn't just come apart, like it twists apart right here. It snapped in half. My entire rod just, boom, snaps in half. And I'm like, no! And I jumped down, or I reached down and I grabbed the top part of the rod just to try and keep the line on to pull the fish up. By the time I grabbed it and pulled it up, which was pretty quick.
He's still on me.
Oh! No!
Snap.
Yes!
Nice fish. Good guy. That good? Yeah. If you have one on too.
No! He was already gone, and I lost the biggest fish I have ever hooked. My buddy saw him. He said he was pretty good, probably 12 to 13 pound range. And this is only a 6 weight, so obviously that's probably why it snapped. I was pretty pumped. My leader and my line, everything kind of held up. It's just literally the fly rod just snapped in half. So what a bummer of a day. Cheap fly rod does not work well when you hook into a good fish. Luckily enough, there was another guy who came by because I was fighting for so long on the big fish. Everybody saw it. A couple people were coming down as I was pulling them in. And this guy was like, oh, that's a bummer, man. Do you have another rod? And I was like, I actually don't. I'm gonna have to get a new one. And he was like, hey man, I use this one, I have another one. So he actually let me use his, which was super cool. It's one thing I love about the fly fishing community is like everybody's really, really cool. I've had a guy on the river give me flies before because he was guiding and he was a little close to me and he felt bad, so he gave me some flies. This dude lets me borrow his rod and continue fishing because he knew we weren't done yet. And so I gave him a couple, they're called popcorn beetles, which is what I caught that fish on. I gave him a couple after I was done because I appreciated it. But on his rod, I end up hooking in another fish. This is the fish I caught on that one. So nowhere near as big, and it literally took me maybe a minute to pull this guy in. It was not hard to get him. So that's how you know you had a really good fish, and I was pretty bummed that I was not able to get a picture with a fish probably like this size. You know, I was super stoked to get him, but I didn't pull him in. I couldn't get him in the net, and that is, I am blaming that one on my rod because he was right there. It was a cheap rod. It's just not meant to withhold that much weight. And I let the fish swim for a while. I got him tired. He was finally ready to come in, and just that weight of him trying to, you know, get away a little bit, it just tugged too far. So what a bummer, but it was such a fun day out there. I had a good time, and yeah, so that's my story for today's video. I've been doing some research, and I think I have a new rod picked out, so I'm gonna have to go pick that one up. And I will show you guys that when I do. But anyway, I hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving. I know it's been a while since I've had a video. I do have that scary video of whatever that thing was I saw in Mid-Lake coming to you guys. So that'll be coming to you soon. I'm still I'm still kind of tweaking it and editing it, trying to make it kind of cool for you guys. So anyway, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys in the next one.